Hello, Barry.
Hi, John. How are you?
Oh, I'm getting by out here in paradise. Of course, we live in the same part of the country, but I think I'm even a little better paradise than you at 7,000 feet. It's 70s and 50s.
I'd forgotten that you had that altitude out there.
That's an advantage this time of year. Hey, one of the things we need to talk about because it doesn't get a whole lot of attention is that the unsustainability of federal fiscal practices is going to spread to the states. If it's unsustainable, that means it's going to end. And when it does, the states might be without a third of their revenue. Yeah, the average state gets about a third of their revenue from the federal government.
Yeah, I think that we've written about the fiscal cliff at the federal level, but as you say, we're also looking at a fiscal cliff for the states that is related to that. And there is certainly going to be a sharp fall off in the amount of revenue flowing from the federal government to the states. So, what's going on here and what can we do about it?
Well, three states have contingency plans for the loss of federal funds, but it seems to be without a deeper dive into those, which we recommend, that they're just addressing the short run symptoms of how to get by with a sudden loss of federal money. And the bigger issue is states need to start thinking about which federally funded things they're going to pick up if those federal funds are gone and how they're going to be able to do that without creating their own problems of unsustainable fiscal practices.
Well, I think we've talked about before. I was in D.C. during the Reagan administration, and one of the things that Reagan did was to create block grants for these states. And it seems to me that the block grants really enable both the federal government and the states to deal with any cutbacks more efficiently. And the reason is that when these states receive block grants, rather than just directly payments to federal programs, they have some choice. They have some discretion about what they do with the money and whether or not they continue federal programs. In some cases, they just drop the programs. In some cases, they reformed them and modified them. Some of them they privatized. So I remember Jeb Bush, I think, in that era, when Jeb Bush was governor of Florida, he used block grants very effectively to improve healthcare, welfare programs, and to design them for Florida. So it seems to me that's at least one answer to the problem.
Well, it's an answer in the sense that it makes it easier for the federal government to back out of these programs once the vice tightens and the bond buyers get a little wary of putting more money into the $40 trillion debt. Yeah, the block grant is the interim step. I'm not so sure that when we get to the fiscal cliff, there's going to be time to phase out these programs. The states may face a sudden loss of this money. By the way, for our listeners, it's worth noting that for most states, the bigger part of these revenues that they're getting from the federal government is for Medicaid. Now, there are other programs funded by federally, but the states. I'm not sure where they're going to find the money to pick up the Medicaid, and I'm not sure how they're going to back out from not doing it. As you say, that's an option. Many states have done that, but entitlements are hard things to go against.
Yeah, I think your state, Utah, actually is one of the states that a few years back, when the federal government mandated some increase in matching for Medicaid, they just chose not to participate. And I haven't followed the Medicaid program in Utah, but that is certainly one response that at least gives the states more control over Medicaid spending, which is just exploding across the country.
Yeah, my former home state of Texas, I think, did the same thing, if memory serves correctly. And yeah, that's one of the ways of dealing with the effects of the unsustainability of federal spending growth and debt growth is to not become dependent on federal dollars to begin with, or to reduce dependence on them. But one of the reasons for our discussion today is to encourage all 50 states, including the three that have at least broached this imminent loss of federal funds to some extent to plan how they're going to fund additional programs at the state level once the federal funding of it at least shrinks big time or disappears really fast.
Yeah, and I think the states have a responsibility to challenge the federal government if they feel that the federal funding is not being appropriately administered or efficiently administered. I think the states should sue. I think the states should challenge the federal government if there's some abuse of these funding programs.
Well, I'm sure in our federal republic of 50 different electorates, that will be something that's attempted. Let's hope that at ALEC and other places, American Legislative Exchange Council, that this becomes a topic of discussion and more states plan before the frenzy hits for having to fund more of their own programs rather than looking for what many people call welfare from Washington, D.C., it's interesting that you can get welfare from somebody or something that by any measure is borderline broke. Yeah, the bond buyers just haven't balked yet. Well, they have to some extent. Interest rates are up at climbing over 5%, but they haven't balked in any abrupt sense yet, but eventually they will.
Yeah, I'm sure there are going to be some bankruptcies involved here. Of course, the bankruptcies at the state and local level are a different proposition, but I think we're going to see some municipalities, the precedent in California, some of those municipalities went bankrupt. And so I think that's probably what a number of municipalities are looking at as this funding dries up. And then the question is, how do you handle a bankrupt municipality? And of course, some states just bail them out, but I don't think that's the answer. I think that the answer is that the state and the local governments need to work with the federal government to, first of all, avoid bankruptcy, and secondly, figure out a way to move forward if their funding is sort of in dire straits.
Yeah, let's emphasize here in closing that the first and most important thing to do, yes, is to avoid the fiscal cliff, and the first and foremost thing that we need to do that is a cap on spending growth, because that incentivizes the bond buyers, gives them confidence that we're serious about what we're doing, and makes all kinds of other things possible and relevant, such as increasing revenue through asset sales, and heaven forbid, even higher taxes in some cases. All of those things become possible and reasonably sensible at the federal level once we cap spending growth, once we assure the bond buyers and the citizens that additional revenue is not just going to go into additional spending.
Well, that's our message for how to deal with what we call the fiscal crisis, the fiscal cliff. So let's hope some people are paying attention.
Yeah, let's hope some of them give us some support here at PolicyTalk.org. Our joint mission is to first make the best possible case for not going over the fiscal cliff. And the second thing is to manage that plunge in a way that minimizes the damage and achieves some important objectives like getting the federal government back to its original size and moving those other functions out of the federal government that are not explicitly in the Constitution, and letting our states decide which of those they want to pick up. And then we as citizens get to choose among the 50 states which ones we want to live in, whether we want to live in a high tax, higher service state. And of course, then there are some states that are high tax and low service. And we vote with our feet to leave those completely.
And that's happening in a very rapid way with California. I don't know what's happening out there, but if you start just taxing wealth, if you start taxing unrealized capital gains in assets, which is what they do with homes, and now you start taxing unrealized capital gains for wealthy people, why should you be surprised that the wealthy leaving en masse from your state. So let's hope that that doesn't spread as well.
And at the other end of the country, I recall a Wall Street Journal article not too terribly long ago that made the case that Florida has twice the people and the same budget as New York.
Huh. That's interesting. I hadn't known that statistic.
So, yeah, you can spend twice the money and not get any better results. All right, we'll do this again soon.